Greetings, programs, and welcome back to Drunkens and Dragons. This is Hanker Infernal here, back behind the camera. Good to have you again. On this episode of the show, we are going to do another Exposed. So we're going to look at every single page of my DM's tome. Now, one of these books, I spend about 1 year to fill it with every idea and note and scribble and drawing and tracking hit points during sessions and everything. These are a big mess. The last video I did was a big hit. I think it's because it's very rare you actually get to see every single detail that a dungeon master uses to make the game. It's often sort of kept behind closed doors because it's not as pretty as you might think it is. So let's just open it up and start browsing through. And I'll just walk you through each page, and maybe this will help you out a little bit. Maybe it'll give you that bump to jump into the art of DM journaling. Okay, this is my very first opening page here, and these are when I usually get my biggest ideas down, something that is going to get me excited each time. So we have these two big chapters, The Fall of the Frozen King, The Legacy of Evermoon. These were sort of the second year of our campaign. So these are deep chapters, basically, of the story. So the first step I did here is this plot outline page, where not only did I recap a couple of things, but I also had some dreams about things I hadn't created yet, like Tower Evermoon. And then I'll just do a couple little bullet points next to each one of, these aren't even ideas. They're just random kind of word cues that later might give me an idea or get my wheels turning. But I don't even know what these things are at this point. They just kind of remind me what my priorities are. So you guys have probably seen this one before. This is a drawing of Tower Evermoon, which was a ruined fortress in our story. And the reason it was ruined and the reason that Alondria's grave here was in front of the castle, that whole thing and how it unfolded became really the linchpin or the turning point of our whole campaign. So I wanted to get that out on paper. This was Zotar, our Illithid super villain. And I hate this drawing, to be honest, but it kept me constantly reminded that this is the guy we're after. Here is when I started to do the first several room designs. This is actually just a life drawing from sitting in the big grassy field at Ren Fair, where I drew the trees in the distance, and I was thinking about these room designs while we were sitting there drinking wine at Ren Fair. And these sort of geometric designs actually became the next several months of gameplay. So they don't make a ton of sense here, but I just had certain ideas like a river crossing and a channel and then a zigzag and really basic geometric ideas. Just, again, something to get you started. Here's just more life drawing sitting at Ren Fair, just drawing a hut. Hey, look, I drew a hut. This is the concept of Grick, who was this giant ogre that had been enslaved by the bad guys. And so when the PCs approached, it actually seemed like he was one of the evil army, but in fact he was their slave, and all he wanted to be to set free. And so it became an interesting encounter because you think he's the enemy, but you really need to unchain him, and he becomes an ally. Here we have Cade Underbottom when he had started to transform or mutate into a partial Umber Hulk. And my party discovered that the bad guys had been experimenting with turning people into Umber Hulks and creating a species called War Hulks. And he was one of the War Hulks, and this is the little brother of one of my PCs, and he actually wound up becoming the lord of a town, and we kind of closed a very large chapter of the story. And here's just during the fight, I was tracking hit points and stuff. This is the first page of the Duragosa concept, which was my twin dragons, which is actually seems like you're fighting one dragon, but because they alternate invisibility spells, and then they eventually reveal that there are two of them. I also had an idea for this cave, which had a giant sword in it called Swordfall, and this was the lair of Duragosa. And these are mainly just notes, including some random tables, about how to get my comprehension of Duragosa going so that later I could just kind of speak it off the cuff. But it all begins with writing it down. More about the Duragosa encounter with these little maggots that it would spawn, and they were really nasty and they would corrode. I always like to corrode metal. And then we had a bridge, a river crossing with this log bridge, which, you know, is a DM Scotty classic. It's a classic in every genre. And then something that you guys have probably seen before, which is my AI chart for Duragosa. So it was a complex battle, and I didn't want to be making a lot of decisions during the fight. I wanted to basically do it like a punch-out boss, where he had a sequence of actions he would do, and if the PCs could learn that sequence, they could beat him. Here we have concepts for the next night, which was called Swordfall, which is, I actually built this in 3D terrain, and so I wanted to get a good sense for the shapes that I wanted to do. And this was a huge encounter. It actually got a little bit too 3D because in spots we couldn't see the minis, and I didn't like that. But a huge encounter where we had all but one party member down, and we had multiple failed death saves. We actually had some people jumping on dragons and sliding off their necks, and we had a PC death. That was a big night. Okay, next we moved from Swordfall over to Tower Evermoon, and I wanted to do a vampire theme with Tower Evermoon, and I wanted to reveal that Florian, one of my players, that his family actually was involved in the cause of all of the evil that was plaguing the land, and I had to figure out how to do that. And so on the one hand, I was designing a huge dungeon, and on the other hand, I was sort of creating this sort of hall of terrors to reveal how his family actually had brought this creature called Salag into the world, and it was the root of all the evil that had plagued the land. It had indeed happened a century ago, and this dungeon revealed that truth. Here I'm just going more into the terrors of Tower Evermoon. And I think you guys may have seen this page already, but over here I list all of the characters, sort of cast of characters, and a really brief statement about how they fit into the story. So if questions are asked, or if those characters appear, I can pretty much almost memorize this, so I can kind of call it from memory, and I don't have to look at notes. And then, of course, always just drawing the characters that are being encountered, both for the benefit of the PCs, as well as for my benefit. I don't always show my journal art to the PCs. Matter of fact, I rarely do. It's mainly for me to get a good, crisp, and fun imagination of what's happening. Here's a minor digression, but this is actually the page where I designed the Daring and the Doomed, the pixel card art game that was on Kickstarter, which will be returning someday. Here is the card list that I did for the Daring and the Doomed. So this is when I was just planning it out. You guys know that I'm a big fan of Dungeon World and have been trying to not only understand it, but incorporate what's so great about it into D&D and into my table, and this is part of taking those notes. Here we have more on DMing Dungeon World, and then we get back to Tower Evermoon over here, and this was designing the big villain at the end of Tower Evermoon, and then how this room of 7 doors worked, and we had some puzzles, and here's my boss, and he had a very Dungeon World-like design, and then I gave him narrative moves, and that all went really great. It was another crazy big battle. Here, just some notes about just thinking about evolving my D20 mechanics in my game, and then big notes about where things were headed. I gave the players some custom-made items that were custom-made for their characters, and then I needed some notes on that, like Florian's infection and Twigs' seeds. Our druid got these magic seeds that had, basically massive infinite power. And so I just was making sure that I have it straight in my head. This isn't for anyone to look at but me. Finally, here's the end of the Duragosa encounter. So you can see my notes are sort of in the future, and then this is actually the night that Duragosa played. So you have a staggered approach. You're concepting in the future, but you're using practical design in the present. And that's why you'll see the journal bounce back and forth over time. So really just writing down all her moves, making sure my stats are somewhat in line with the monster manual. So now here we're headed actually over to the Tower Evermoon dungeon, so I still haven't quite designed it, so you can see how I was working in the future. And once again, I have all these notes, and these notes are really just for me to know so that I can answer whatever questions might come up. And this is kind of what happened in the past, and then there's a couple characters that I wanted to have some pretty crisp lines, so they gave, specific clues. Here we have the level flowchart for Tower Evermoon. So this was a dungeon with more than 30 rooms in it. It was a really big dungeon, and it had 3 levels. It had the tower, the ground level, and then the pit below, and they all interconnected in different ways, both through space and through time. And so I needed to arrange these. There were 7 rooms, or 7 areas sort of per level, and then how they interacted and what states they would be in the past and the future. And wow, that was a really big project and really fun. And this is just starting to bring it together. Meanwhile, we have a little road encounter on the way there. So this encounter found its way into Encounter Machine, my podcast that I do with Tabletop Terrors. So if you want to hear more about the details of a chance encounter at River Glen, that's where I designed that encounter, was right there. And as usual, the whole truth, one of the big important elements of designing content for me is you got to know what happened in every single fact so that when questions come up, you can answer them. This is playtest results from the Daring and the Doomed. So now we really get into the guts of designing Tower Evermoon. So each room has a section here on a page, both with its geometry so that I can make the room in front of the players, as well as like key answers. And my key answers are kind of what happened now, what happened in the past, and then mechanical elements if I need them. And then you can see it's turned into also like a hit point scratch pad when I was at the table. So now we have more of this is the courtyard level of Tower Evermoon, and same approach. What happened now, what happened in the past, and then mechanical elements for each one. I also like to give my rooms titles, like the Crumbling Armory or Where Elise Ended Her Life. And I just tell the players those titles just as a sort of a way to narrate the game or give the game a feeling of chapters. So now we have the pit. This is down below Tower Evermoon, and these are just more of the same. So designing the geometry of the room, entrances and exits. Must need another. Let's get another thing of coffee here. So there's that. Now, finally, down in the depths of Tower Evermoon, and I was designing my sort of time travel mechanic, which I called the Gloom. And we had this chul, and you had to kite the chul. He was the only thing that could eat through these barriers in the dungeon corridors. So you had to kite him around because he was sort of your key. Okay, and then finally we have the planar prism, which is the boss room or the final room of Tower Evermoon, where this machine is opening and closing portals to different elemental planes using a laser sort of device that's focused by an illithid. And he is using the power from the planes and drawing it to open this massive portal, which Salag is entering through. So Salag is kind of like the Ogdru Jihad from Hellboy. It's this massive thing of tentacles and, basically your basic Cthulhu super death monster. And then I had to do all the mechanics involved in that fight. And that was a complex fight. Yeah, wow, that was really fun. Doing a huge abomination, some ads, and an illithid all at the same time was just wow. So finally, I have this page called The Road Ahead. So we had a big sort of, sigh of relief because we had gotten through this fight, but the planar prism cast my players out into Frostfall. And then I just needed to get a good summary, and I needed to look ahead. And here actually was a Dungeon World one-shot that I ran called Mines of Silence and Salt. This is more about Mines of Silence and Salt. This is just the monsters and items and more geometry of the levels. And then, just thinking in Dungeon World terms, like ways to make them squirm, ways to tempt them, sort of narrative hooks that I could use in the game. Here's helping design new Dungeon World sort of character archetypes for that group. And then this is more details for the Dungeon World sort of mini campaign that I wrote, including common sworn curses, skeleton quirks, orc names. These are just tables that will give me some richness at the game session. So here we have another brainstorming session on the Daring and the Doomed. So just getting sense for rules, how this could work, how that could work, and ooh, hey, there's an idea. Maybe this is an RPG. Whoa, what am I designing? Here's Project Thunder. This is my ongoing project, which is trying to create something for Runehammer Games that is significant contribution to the role-playing hobby, and this is just not an easy task. I mean, D20 really holds a very potent anchor on the hobby and on the industry, and so I'm always working on this RPG, which is finally going someplace, but we'll talk about that another time. Here's a little bit about Mokhtar and designing some of the dice mechanics in Mokhtar. Again, working on what could be an RPG that could really change things for people and really be a deep and long playing game. It's a very complex puzzle if you actually want to contribute. There's a lot of derivative games, and I don't want to do that. More about Mokhtar. And here we have, this is another Dungeon World and sort of Mokhtar hybrid one-shot that I did involving these galleons, and it had 4 or 5 rooms, and this is just getting a sense for the elements of that evening. And as you can see, like, I don't always write every single thing down, but I write at least enough where it's in my head. So I know that's a little bit cheating, but that's how it's got to be. Here's designing some moves. For Dungeon World, we also had these Mokhtar races that we were doing for a while. And then, hey, back to D&D. So this is Frostfall and my big group up in this huge area where they had this giant quest, and they're basically traveling for weeks on end. We fought a Remoras and frost giants and a frost worm, and wound up on a spelljammer. And this is getting all those details worked out. Here we have just a scratch sheet from a play night, and then we're moving on toward the whole truth of Frostfall. And then this is actually where I designed Night of the Crack right here. It was originally called Arma Gerblin. I think Night of the Crack is a better title. So Crossing These Expanse was the next chapter for my D&D group, where they really kind of got to sink their teeth into spelljamming and having a flying galleon and the mechanics involved, and using supplies from a Sundered World and stuff like that. We had a lot of crazy stuff go on there. This is the end of the Dungeon World mini campaign that I was doing, including the sort of the Mokhtar hybrid. And then this is when I started working at Carbon Games, and I was making some notes on how we were going to add a single player campaign to the game Ermech. Again, working on Ermech here. Okay, here we have Frostfall. I think this is actually the night that we played in the game shop. So we rented out one of the back rooms at the local game shop and played in there and got beer service the whole night, and that was really fun. And then finally we're out of Frostfall and we're back to Thunderhome, which is this flying mountain in our world. You probably know Thunderhome from the Forgotten Realms. And Argloasa, who is actually the mother of Duragosa, and digging deeper into the sort of the dark plot of our story. This was a 5-area dungeon. Each area was about 2 rooms. Here we have more about the ships and how that all worked out. Have a little bit of a scratch play, and here's some more notes from work. Wow, and then here we're getting into the depths of Thunderhome and Anvil Rock, and this is the Lizard Warrens, where we had mushrooms and we had lizards, and it was finding out that there were liquefied remains, and this got dark in here. Here's just reminders after some stuff went down, and then I was kind of working on some stuff for work about this kind of world map idea. Okay, then we get to the sort of the big conclusion of Thunderhome, which was this temple where Soth, you may know him from the Monster Manual and from D&D lore in general, was running this operation, and he actually turned out to be the Frozen King, and we had been waiting almost 2 years for this battle to play out. So just getting all my details down. Here's where I was actually designing the Hanker Infernal NPC, who kind of changed, and he came back for a brief time just to sort of escort the players to the next chapter. And then my final chapter of the entire campaign, called Kings of Hell, just designing how that was going to work. Here, this is me designing the meta gameplay for my characters. I wasn't sure if the campaign was going to go on for another year or exactly what was going to happen. So I designed a metagame where they are earning supplies and contributing to a bigger war effort, and over time changing the war. But my players ended the campaign with such a bang that none of this became necessary. Here's the Cloud Riders of Arak. So you've probably seen my Cloud Ray, and this is where they basically journey to the desert, which is east of the Sword Coast, to find the sort of the entrance to Hell. Here's, you guys maybe are familiar with the Game of Crowns. This is the entire game design for that game. It's a really, really simple game. And this is just working on Arak and drawing Cthulhu as usual. Here we have the rooms involved in the second to last, or second to last. I don't know. This is coming in toward the end of the campaign, and then I took a little break to do these rooms you guys know, with Vault of Duke Harold, The Deadly Detour, Machines of Moloch. This is just drinking beer and sitting in the bar and kind of dreaming. This was where I was helping Imbalanced Games create the new Kickstarter called Dwarves, which should be coming out very soon. It's a dice stacking game. Welcome to Paradise. Yeah, so this was actually an omitted encounter called the Aspens, where hell was actually this really nice sunset in an aspen grove, and then it all turned dark. But time felt a little short, and so I wound up skipping it. These are just notes for videos that I wanted to get done, basically taking notes from all of you guys' input and making sure that I build the channel based on what you want to see. And this was actually the first design of the tattoo that I wound up getting, is just kind of sketching off the cuff for no reason. Here's designing all the monsters that were in Arak, the Cloud Ray and Greya, this sort of avatar angel, and the devil mages. And we had some invisibility and some teleporting, and it was really challenging. In the Infernal Seed, this is where they crashed their galleon in hell, and they actually had to fight themselves in undead form. Kind of a classic component of any real full campaign is you have to find and fight yourselves at some point. It's a really good mechanic to use, and it reveals just how totally awesome PCs are. They're very hard to beat. This is designing the Pyramid of Asmodeus, which also, because of the length of things, I compressed greatly into sort of one of these. This was realizing that my campaign was over, and I was starting to think about new things. I knew that Index Card RPG was starting to come together, and I wanted to just take a moment and draw little things, and I'm sure all these elements will find their way into Index Card RPG, but as you guys have probably intuited, Index Card RPG is where I'm going for 2017, so I really want to go all in on that. And continuing to design on that note, thinking about how cards create space and how you can continue to be tactical and have all the things that D20 has, but with a simpler, more creative kind of flow. So that's what thinking through all this is. Here's just drawing for drawing's sake, and also continuing to work on dwarves with imbalanced games. So some of this art actually found its way onto the rules cards and some of the cards. Hey, now you're going to get a sneak peek at Holmgang, which is the Viking dueling card game coming from Derek Cutsinger. And he was very kind and very timely in his willingness to have me do the art for that game. And so I just did the art right here in the journal. I thought it would be fun to do it with real pen to give it kind of a gritty, real world human look. So that's what these following drawings are. These are all the drawings that are going to appear in Holmgang, the Viking dueling game. So that's going to be on Kickstarter in a few months, I imagine. So it's axes, shields, and gods. So these are all mirrored on the cards, and you'll be seeing that really soon. He sent me a prototype copy. I'm actually going to pick it up today. This is when I went to Oculus Connect in San Jose and was terribly inspired by Goro Fujita and his art, and then also was working on the finishing touches for Temple of Asmodeus while I was on the plane. And basically started thinking about Mecha, started thinking about Oculus Medium, getting back into sculpting and just making sure, I'm visualizing shapes that are actionable. This is, I think me and my friend Spiker were sitting out on the patio in the sun in California, and we were both just sitting there drawing because we like doing that, and I was just working on these kind of mecha designs. And more of that drawing session that day, so just kind of doodling characters and stuff. So here are the finishing touches on Pilgrims of Arak. So that this is the end of the campaign finally. I was about to run it, so I had all the notes coming together. And then here's the real finishing page. This is the page I actually took to the table. You can always tell which one is my actual working page because it has the hit points all in a big mess. But this is what I actually take to the table. This is about all I need for a night of gameplay. And then here's the end of that night. So this is Asmodeus himself, and there's a tree. So now I was free of the campaign, and I started just sort of freewheeling and thinking about new things. And then one of my players offered to DM a new group for us, and so I had to roll up a character, which of course is going to be a dwarf. So I rolled up old Yukon Pete here, and this is just a portrait of Yukon Pete and his equipment. And then here's actually rolling the character up. And I don't even know what this mess is. Free association. So here's actually notes that I take during play as a PC. So I like to do that so that I can look back and help recap the game. Here's sort of doodling some lizard men, and just taking notes about projects that were ahead. And it really, this is all just gibberish. Yeah, so this is thinking about some new room designs and where to take the channel, and then I just wound up drawing spirals. This is the aborted sketch for the cover art of Home Gang, and then here's the finished drawing that you'll see on the cover of the box and the back of the cards in Home Gang. So really hope you guys can check that out soon. Maybe I'll do a video on the prototype. One of the PCs in our new group is a lizard man, and so I was struggling to draw a lizard man head because they're so weird looking. More lizard men. And then here is a little bit of secret information. I've been working with Absolute Tabletop to design a full module which will be available on Drive-Thru-RPG. And this is the beginning of that design work. And this is following up on that. So this is designing more of the spaces, and there's a little bit of a spoiler here. So if you're going to be a player on any of Absolute Tabletop's modules, you might want to look away for a minute. But this is designing the creatures and the places involved in the module. And more on that front, designing maps and mechanics. But really trying to use up paper now too, because I'm coming up on the end of the book, and it's a good time to pick it up. So here's another section of that module. And then here I was going to do all these room designs, and I wound up just doing these really rough pieces because I wound up mapping and designing these rooms in VR. And you're going to see some of that coming up on the channel, especially on my Saturday morning shows. So it's just like sort of an aborted page, just like, I don't really want to draw this. These are these undead nuns that I've been doing. You'll see more of them coming soon. Here we have more notes from our second session playing in the group. So this is just me as a player, just drawing as a player, just kind of biding my time. And then finally we have ICRPG, which, as you're probably starting to guess, is far more than just a collection of art cards. It's actually going to be a full-blown RPG with a campaign, some pre-made characters, its own rule set. It's really coming together, and I'm super excited, but it's got a ways to go, and this is just me working on it. More of working on ICRPG, how to make it interesting, how to keep everything I like about tactical games, but how to put it into card form. Sets of loot for ICRPG, bit of spoiler there. More about RPG, and then what I have ahead for 2017. This is just me being, here comes the end of the book, so I'm doing this stuff. I'm doing ICRPG, I'm doing the module for Absolute Tabletop. I've got my second novel coming out. We've got a couple of Kickstarters coming out. Yeah. And that, my friends, is the end of my second Dungeon Master. That was a year of work right there. Dwell not on what can't be done, but on what be done. Dwell not on what can't be done, but on what must be done. Certainty is the armor of the invincible. So face your desires with grim honesty and get to work. Basically, that means don't worry about anything. Just be honest with what you want in life and go do it. And that is the end of that book. So I can put the rubber band on this baby and kiss it goodbye. And I have downsized. This is my journal for 2017, and it is very, very small. And I've already begun, as you can see. But what's inside there will remain a secret until a year from now. So I know everybody really likes the Tome revealed videos, but they take more work. They reveal more of the truth, and they are probably the longest term, biggest projects I do, so you'll have to wait. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Drunkens and Dragons. I'm Hanker Infernail, signing off, and strength, honor, and a nice cup of coffee. Till next time.